Welcome to another episode of Modern Block. Today I want to go through kind of what I've noticed is the most popular players in fantasy rugby for the tournament, just before we get into it. Kind of like to help you pick your teams and that kind of stuff. But yeah, before we get into it, please comment, please share, please subscribe, and yeah, get the word around, add your own opinions of who you want in your fantasy team, why you've built your fantasy team your way. But yeah, let's get into it as this World Cup comes ever closer. I think we're on 16 days now, and it's just, can't wait anymore. So, 16 days as of this recording. I don't know when it's going to go out, so yeah. Cool, so let's get into it. Interestingly enough, I've taken some sources, some fantasy leagues, some opinions, and this is pretty much the fantasy team that it seems like the most popular players in each of the positions. So I've kind of taken the normal amount that each fantasy team requires, so it's not obviously the fixed positions, but rather the amount that they each require. So yeah, let's get into it. On the props, interestingly enough, so we've got a French, Irish and Australian combination here with Demba Bomba, Thad Furlong and Sepoku Kepu, which are actually some stunning options and really nice to see the French get represented here. Ireland have always said have one of the best forward packs in the tournament, so front rows especially in this tournament, especially Furlong, consistent and great. I think there's some other good players also there, Porter for example, but obviously Furlong was chosen, and then Sepoku Kepu has had a very consistent rugby championship. Australia's scrum is definitely anchored by him, so I can understand those choices, and it's quite an interesting couple. In the hookers, we've got South African Malcolm Marx, Argentinian Augustin Creevy, and then those are both great scrummies, and both being chosen from the Rugby Championship, good performances. It's tough to really judge Creevy's performance in the scrum. It hasn't really been his scrum that showed. Sean, he's always been a very tactical player, a great leader, and I think that definitely gives him a lot of credit and a lot of points. He's a stalwart really in that position, and Marx's dominance over the ball in the ball stealing, as I think where a lot of fantasy players are getting their points there. Obviously you've got to remember each league is slightly different, but for example Super Brew, you get credits for steals, for like not giving much offences, and both players are relatively good in that, and both players do a lot of open play because you also get for tackles and for blind breaks. So this is obviously what people are choosing their teams. I will probably bring a video about what my top 15 will be, if you want to choose your fantasy of this, but obviously this is the public's opinion of that. So yeah, this is not mine, this is what everybody else is saying. Let's get to locks. We've got Welsh Alan Wynne-Jones, South African Eben Etzebeth, and English's Maru Itoje. All great choices. Again, I think people are really going for people who generate points. All of these players are more in the less famous in the line out and more famous in open play and dominance and tackling, and that's definitely something you need to consider when picking your fantasy team. You can definitely see the focus being on players who are very commonly up there in the tackle list, up there in the line breaks list, and a lot of the time also up there in the ball stealing list. So good to see. Definitely good to see some representation from the Northern Hemisphere there, as I do feel that they have some of the best forwards in the tournament going forward that's happening. In the loosies, we've got Australian Hooper. I think a lot of people aren't picking Pocock just because they're not sure if he's going to be playing the first few games. Hooper is seen is definitely almost a must have and will have. So I guess I agree the safe choice there makes sense. Argentinian Pablo Montera, and the Englishman Billy Villapolo, and then Irishman CJ Stander. Well, Irish player CJ Stander, South African, but technicalities. All great open play players. Villapolo is a beast of a man, so I get it. CJ Stander is very well known for his ball stealing capabilities, and also quite the loose player when it comes to open play. Hooper and Pocock are pretty much the pinnacle of ball stealing, so I get that choice there completely. They definitely know, they've been stalwarts in that for years, and probably him and Pocock make up, in my opinion, two of the best loose forwards in the game at the moment, if not in, I'd say, the last 20 years. But yeah, my opinion, but it seems like most of the people in fantasy leagues agree. Getting off to scrum halves, we've got South African Faf de Klerk and Irishman Conor Murray. Both, again, great players. Faf hasn't had the greatest season this year, but is definitely improving, and I think hasn't given maybe enough leeway to get there. But it is a case of one thing he has done very well is slowed his pace down to fit with the South African style of play, and it has worked for him. He's learned a lot in the Northern Hemisphere, something that I think he's learned from players like Conor Murray, for example, who really epitomise that tactical Northern style. And Irish, I think Conor Murray does get a lot of benefit from a really sturdy scrum, but as you say, it's not only, you definitely have to utilise the benefit you get, and I do get the choice in him as he is a very consistent scrum half, reliable, and can definitely score tries on the moment. So both of those players are point makers right there for their sniping ability. They're keeping the other opponents on their feet. I definitely think that you can get a couple of great points from them. Fly halves, the only New Zealander in the bunch, very surprisingly I have to admit. It seems like the public aren't really picking the New Zealanders outright for their team. Don't ask me why. There's a couple of New Zealanders I would pick in my team, but it seems like this is from the public. I need to stress this is not my opinion, but the public's opinion. The only New Zealander, not even the current standing New Zealand fly half, Richie Mwanga, it's actually Beauden Barrett. Which I think most of this tournament will be playing fullback, but it seems the players are feeling that people are feeling they can get more out of him in fly half. So interesting. Obviously, fantasy breaks down, especially in your fly half position. You get a lot of points from your kicker. So I do question this decision from the public. Most of the time, I don't think Beauden will be kicking. So in my opinion, if I was picking a fantasy team, I would not put Beauden. I'd put Mwanga over him any day, as I think he'll be doing a lot more of the kicking. He's a much more consistent kicker following Super Rugby, and I think that's fair. I know at the moment in the Rugby Championship, a lot of the kicking was done by Beauden, but I think in 2 games they swapped him out for Richie. So if Steve Hansen hasn't already seen that it's not the correct choice, if I was Mwanga, I'd be questioning it heavily. So I think as a fantasy player, definitely monitor the plans. We will obviously have to see what Hansen goes with for the tournament, but I would question putting Beauden as my fly-off. The other fly-off, Owen Farrell, a stalwart for English rugby, a consistent winner, great kicker, great tactical player, and really, really, really good at reading lines. Good try scorer. And Eddie Jones has pretty much built his team around him. In my opinion, when Eddie Jones took the position, he pretty much wanted 5 superstars. That was his opinion of how he's going to win the World Cup. He says every World Cup team has 5 world-class players, and he said currently they only have 1 in that interview, but he never mentioned the player. But most people feel at the time of that interview, Owen Farrell was his star. And I think he's built his team around Owen Farrell's tactics, and it has worked for them. So I definitely think that's a great choice if in your team, especially as a kicker, as England's very, very. I think they're going to have a couple of pool games. The other thing, I'll get to some advice on the fantasy at the end of the video. Centres, we have Welsh Jonathan Davies, Englishman Tuolangi, and Australian Kurtley Beale. Very interesting. Kurtley Beale fell out of favour in Cheika's mind for a while, but really has had a good season, and it seems the public has agreed. So it's good to see him come there. Tuolangi has also definitely, I think he's one of the players Jones has lifted into that world-class status to get his World Cup team ready. So a great try scorer, a great strong man to run through defensive lines, and often the point man for the English attack. So I get why people are picking him, as I think he could generate quite a bit of points for you. Jonathan Davies, again, similarly, he's got definitely a great attacking player. I think he's a little bit more tactically minded, and that definitely helps him. I'm not sure if he's going to be scoring a ton of tries, but he has had a great season, so it's good for him. And I do think the Welsh don't have the toughest pool, obviously, besides the Australians, so I think there could be quite a couple of points to come from him. In the backs, we have Scotsman Stuart Hodge, New Zealander Ricky Ione, Englishman Johnny May, and Welshman Williams. All great players, and this is obviously a large percentage of your tries are going to be scored from these players, so essentially it's definitely good to take as much as possible strong try scorers, known for try scorers, line breakers in this area, as often these are the guys putting the ball down over the line. So I think these definitely are some of the prime choices I would choose. I am not even sure who I would pick in my starting lineup here. I would probably go, if I had to choose right now, Ione and May from those groups, but I definitely want to evaluate further if these are the top 4 in my opinion, but this is the top 4 of the public. So yeah, I know I made a mistake earlier on the fact that only Bowden Barrett, I forgot that Ricky only actually was changed later, was from my stats, came in later. He wasn't there originally, but of the updated states he came through. So yes, he is there. So that's another New Zealander in the team, but if surprisingly few in my opinion, considering they're the world's best team, but interesting. Obviously that is what the public has chosen. Some advice if I was going into building your fantasy team. Definitely focus on players who score more tries, players who are dominant in the field. But not only that, the other sly thing you can do is look at the teams those players are playing. Unfortunately, the World Cup is a little bit of a lopsided affair sometimes, especially in the different rounds, and obviously fantasies are broken up in different rounds. And take that into account. If the team is playing, for example, I wouldn't pick New Zealanders or South Africans in the first round, as both of them are probably not going to be. That's not going to be a very high-scoring game, in my opinion. Obviously, there are times that does happen, but often players don't get tons of points, as it's a very hard-fought game. I would pick players from teams where they're going to be playing maybe slightly lower opponents, as you can get these runaway scores often in World Cups. My little bit of advice, 5 cents, take it or leave it, but yes. But yeah, thanks guys, that's what the public thinks. Let me know what you think down below. If you have any opinions on the public, change the public's mind, I don't mind. Yeah, let's see. But please share, please subscribe, please comment down below if you have any other thing else to say. But yeah, thanks guys.